Honourable members, this sitting is now resumed. When the resumption was taken, we were at order number 7, and to that we shall revert. Honourable member for St. Michael East.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. I have been rather mute for a considerable time. I was about to say a gag for a considerable time.
Yeah.
But my colleague, my friend from St. Peter, delivered one of the most comprehensive presentations with a philosophy that ran consistently with a common trajectory. It was a beautiful piece of political embroidery. Some people speak on issues and you have to spend 10 years of your life trying to untangle the things that they're saying. But this was very clear, and it was a lesson to me. And somehow, I don't have the capacity to deliver it the way in which he did, but the clarity itself was inspiring. Ma'am, we don't change institutions for the sake of changing institutions. Historic circumstances always change institutions. And this marriage today between rural and urban derived from the birth and the consistency and commonality stem from the second half of the 1990s until now. There's always a reason why a government, and in particular this government, would have seen it necessary to have a rural and an urban institution like the one that we have up to this moment, until this bill goes to the stage of becoming law. In the 1990s, when I came into Parliament, one of the greatest prime ministers in the history of the Caribbean, and there are two prime ministers that I consider to be two of the greatest because of their influence not only on 166 square miles, but because of the influence they had on the entire Caribbean. I remember then we were focusing on eradication of poverty. We were talking about social transformation. And in all the social services and even in the economic entities and government. Prime Minister then, Honourable, was talking about economic transformation, social transformation, to the point that even a ministry was called social transformation. And urban and rural became a subsection of social transformation. The Prime Minister said then that he wasn't happy with the way in which the Ministry of Housing and Lands and the National Housing Corporation was delivering the services. And he felt that because he had to move at a rapid pace to eradicate poverty, he needed two institutions. The philosophy between the two institutions were the same, but he was influenced by what was needed or what was demanded in the rural communities and what was demanded within the urban communities. The density of the population was in the urban areas, and he put a whole social policy. It was the reformation of the social policy of the government at the time. So this was not just continuing government as usual. And the decision to have those two institutions was grounded in the report that came from the Inter-American Development Bank on poverty. If you go back to the data, it focuses on addressing certain issues under the umbrella of poverty. And housing was one of the main ones, and it indicated that the younger population of the country were in need of housing. Now, my problem with this, and has always been, especially everybody talking about housing, they only need housing if there's homelessness. Other people talk about housing, but they can't understand because they don't know what homelessness means. But when a man sleeps in the street and he has his lucidity, he understands what housing means. When you come up different parts of the urban communities, on the shops at night, on the different government institutions that carry canopies, and you see men sleeping underneath there, these people understand what housing means because it's hopeless. When a man comes out of the mental hospital, because not that he'll be fully restored to normality or normalcy, whichever is the correct term. The Americans say one thing, the British say the other. No, all too right. All of us, all to them right. All to right. You think I would believe that the British right and the Americans are right? Right now we still gotta find it right there for ourselves. But all of us right. So we quite understand the justification why reform was necessary. There's nobody can understand the importance of providing homes for human beings than people who lived in slavery and colonialism. There's no minister who should not understand at different points in our history where we had to use the land of a big plantation like Barbados, as it was. The only thing it got is barbaric around the boundaries. The whole country was a plantation. From north to south, from east to west, one big plantation. The biggest plantation in human existence was Barbados. And the people who control it, the people who stole these lands, never focus any attention on housing for us. And this should always be a very passionate debate. I don't believe that the debate should only occur at the level of Parliament. The evidence is echoing in the communities. What you see a few days ago shapes the policy and tell us when we are doing something right or wrong. The shaping of a housing policy must come from among the people. And that's why he said it's about homelessness. A man who walks down at night and pick up card can't get a house because the criteria, even if the houses were available, and they're not available, the criteria is so severe that he will live a whole lifetime and never own a house. I always have the opinion that if you really want to understand how critical this thing is, don't put it under the umbrella of need for housing, stereotyping this thing. And people hear you talk about housing, they can't even imagine that you just want a one-bedroom unit in the Pine, or they never experienced these things. They don't understand the ramifications of when the housing is secondary housing or inferior housing in comparison to where they live. People got 3 bedrooms, 6 toilets, a bath, like they live in a hotel. You know what it is for a person who live in a house and don't even have a toilet? So the people in the communities demanding the quality of housing that they need. And so the emphasis in 1998, that's when he came here. The emphasis was on the eradication of poverty, and housing came to be one of the elements that we need to address. And the Prime Minister then put urban development to also execute the policy which came out of the Territory Freehold Purchasing Act. Because you can't divorce land from housing. You can't divorce a pen from ink. And the Prime Minister, urban, will be responsible for executing the Territory Freehold Purchasing Act. Now, I want to ask the question, what is happening with the commitment that we have made in law to paying the additional sum beyond the $250 that the tenants the tenants-in-law must pay if, for example, the land costs $6 per square foot. The state has agreed to pay the additional $3.50. And that's what I'm saying, that the policy must be shaped by the people. When the representative of St. Peter say that the people of 6 Mains hold this view about the dragging of the feet of Parliament. You didn't say it that way, but that's the only way it's come out. He obviously was saying, this is what the policy should be. This thing has been dragging too long. We need to address it. If we got big-head men and big-head women in Parliament, and you have problems in St. Peter, especially of the kind, and I think if I have some idea of what was happening down there, the people in the Fish Bay were a bit uneasy on what the policy would have been, and if they would be displaced from the specific area. Then we must come as men and women, especially at the level of Parliament, and have a discussion on that. But it's something that's been lingering for a long time. I've seen many papers on it. Many papers. I am one of the people who's strongly against any Chinese housing. Them boxes, I against them. This ain't got nothing to do with the minister or disliking or liking against. The present Prime Minister invite me to inspect them in my constituency, I would not even go in the building. I was scared that it collapsed for me. I see the members in main assembly in these things. I cannot even believe that a country will sell these things to a dependent state like Barbados. I am no architect. I don't understand angles, quality of material, but I can see. I know that they don't have any back doors. So the housing policy, and it's not the minister's fault. It's these people want to dump all kind of inferior commodities, including houses, on small states. No rising out of the ashes. And end up discrediting the whole country and discrediting ministers. The minister can say that, I can say it. Now that we have the urban, I know that those jobs were done by NHC, but now that we have the urban, I have a lot more to say on that, but not now. But now that we have the UDC, it must not be just seen as a change in the physical construct of two institutions come together. It must be part of a reform of government's policy. So it's just a matter of interpreting. It's a matter of interpreting how things are done. And not to be always pointing a finger at persons who don't even know what is likely to be done, especially when you sign contracts with these people. The history of the Chinese is well known to everybody living in black states, whether it's on the African continent or anywhere in the diaspora. We know how these people operate. I'm not talking about racism. We know how these people operate. And we must not fool ourselves. We must not play a secondary role to anybody, any other human beings on the face of the earth. That is why I made the point just now. If I call a word and the Americans accustomed to use it and the British accustomed to use it, I can settle for the standards of the British and say, no, that is the correct word. I might even look for the dialect if I do it, but I am so mentally poisoned by British influence that the only thing that can come to mind is how the British describe this or what the British say it is. What the British say it is. This policy must also reflect an understanding of where we are now in relation to urban development, also rural development. This new policy, not just urban and rural come together, and I believe that regulations and discussions over a period of time, the two departments will be able to even broaden their responsibilities. And I say, as you start talking about housing, and you start to stereotype people, you believe that one man deserves a house and another man don't deserve it. And the man, somebody that deserves the house, is a man that rightfully said, in a different context, but a man that don't have shoes. And he steps into the new amalgam of urban and rural, and people got the same mindset. So a man that really deserve a house, you only want a little one bedroom. But you feel that you can't give it to him. I see it. And then these people out there, they know that they deserve a house. But they also know how people perceive them. And they don't ask for a house. And we preside over a whole set of homeless people walking all around, especially in urban, the most densely and the most commercially active areas, looking for some way to sleep at night because they got to concentrate on their safety. When the Treasury building was there, people sleep out there at night. They go look for Hans Shalidas, Frank B. Armstrong, all these people, and get card boxes and make beds. You can't be a man or a woman from in this parliament and see that every day and every night and be devoid of any feelings and concerns for these people. Many times when people of a certain nature who are victims of people who only 10 years ago were in the same situation come to me, I have to call the minister that's responsible for welfare. And he has to explain to officers, no, you gotta give them a hand. A lady called me this morning, for example. She has 4 children, don't work. She told me she'd get $100 and something from the welfare department, and one of the children, I can't remember it is autism or what. So she said, Mr. Prescott, you got no money. Can you bring something for me? These things that you hear every day. We are, in my view, when we talk about urban and rural, this is an extension of the welfare policy. This is an extension of the welfare policy. The welfare department give food hampers and so on. We have to provide housing for these people. And in many cases, I remember Prime Minister Owen Arthur put $10 million inside the poverty fund, executed by urban, and at times by the welfare department, to address other elements of poverty, to make sure, according to the Honourable member from St. Peter, following the maxim of we have to stop poor people from being poor. There's just a few lines, but it is significant in the manner in which we execute our social policies across Barbados. And the reality is that bureaucrats, if it can be done, bureaucrats must also share something in common with us when it comes to having that same philosophical guidance that comes from the actual rationale of the members of parliament and the government itself. You can't have a policy, I was going to call it socialist rev, but I believe that if Professor Arthur was here, or even Professor George Bell, well, he was still, I believe both persons would be rather proud of him. I believe that they would have been proud of him. I listened to the speech from beginning to the end. I haven't had a smile in Parliament for a long time, right? But I said, this is clarity. Right? And I really believe that lots of us in politics, BLP or DLP talk, should let me know if you're a demon or human. And I know if you're a demon or human. I know if you're a demon because you belong to the DLP or if you belong to the BLP. I listen to the things you say. And obviously, I got to watch your action too. But everybody that says to us, they believe that we should help to eradicate poverty and lift up people and things of that nature. They don't listen to them. The first thing I gotta hear first, and I don't hear them. But we need people in the House of Assembly, not to be quarreling about which party you belong to. If you get here, you gotta help people, brother. You can keep branch meetings every day and every night, but when you're in the seat, everybody coming to you. And they ask you to resolve their problems. So the advance and the party only makes a difference if there's something that that party believes in that the opposing party don't believe in. And if it is your job is to prove that the other one don't believe in it. And that is what this new institution must set an example in this new program, not just because we bridge two entities together and call it one. The Christians will talk about 2 in 1 and 1 in 2 and 3 in 1 and 2, all that. It is a new institution having to deal with new things, carrying the same label, just like my father was Prescott and I'm Prescott, and hopefully my offspring will be called Prescott too, right? Hopefully, and hopefully that, hopefully they won't tell me my dad is Humphrey.
You have 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
My head too big. The things are act of reform, so we're expecting to see the new institution expand its focus. The width of the focus was there before, but I think that we should now look to see how, when people leave the mental hospital, when people leave prison, we're talking about integrating the people back into this mainstream of the society itself. When you come out from prison, your family don't want you. Society don't want you sometimes, because if they feel like you did something wrong, people feel like they can do it always till eternity. Nobody can, if somebody by accident embrace you and put you on the job, and then look around and miss the glasses that probably fell on the ground, the bodies look at you first to see if you take them and put them in your pocket. And we got to be a government with a difference. Give these people opportunities. I understand that sometimes these people are also homeless people. And homeless people need a home. Lots of the people that walk around want everybody ain't got to be stuck with the institution. You look at them and put them in an institution, and certain people ain't going in no institution. And when you go in the institution, you get stigmatized in the institution. We can look to build houses too. The government was once there. They once had a welfare program. This is still a welfare program. We had a welfare program before at the National Assistance Board, and we had one at the Welfare Department. We knew that there were people that don't have money to pay rent. And the government, nothing too expensive, but they provide something that these people can live and sleep within the precincts of a small house that people used to call welfare houses. NAB houses. It helped to preserve the health of our brothers and sisters. And I believe that there are even more people of that kind than people who can't pay rent. I'm coming home, man. But I also must reflect on you, Madam Deputy Speaker, who also serve
You thought it was homeless.
as minister and a government representative, and you would have had the experience of seeing some of these people coming to you on a daily basis and asking for help. They had no home, they had no money, they had no clothes at the welfare department. I don't know what has happened. I don't know when these things were changed, but the welfare department produced a small house. I don't know what the size of it was. I am not so good at that, but mostly a little 4x6 thing at the front and a little 4x6 at the back. And those people live happily. If you see the curtains, I don't know, you call it the things in those houses then they used to call them blinds. The bigger houses got curtains and drapes and things of that nature. But these people was extremely happy with the government's offer to help them. And they're developing that house when they had good jobs, and then they moved out of the houses. So I'm saying that urban and rural structurally combined, but I also believe that it must go a little further and have new interpretations of the various tenets. Well, you can change them. You don't have to change the legislation. How if there's a homeless, you know it's homelessness. But you can't leave out the people that I just said. You can find in Sellers Street, in Reed Street, in Bay Street, Penny Esplanade, and many other locations around Barbados. You know, Madam Chair, this is the last piece. You know, when we tried to tackle that, when they had the sunset legislation for cricket, ma'am, you would have known my experience in that period of history when they said that I was the first man that brought a bill to cabinet and criticized the bill. I asked, give me a chance to speak on the bill. I never read a bill yet. People in the ministry write all types of foolishness and then tell me that the police will be allowed to come and pick up the people off the street. I said, I would never be part of that. I didn't care who write it. I am not doing that. I don't know who belong to me. We out there on the street at night because they don't have anything to eat. They don't have any home to go to. The police go take up the man and put him in jail, but the police can't carry the place else. That direction will have to come from somebody who has a medical background, and I was told then that at least 2 doctors will have to confirm that you're unworthy to be on the street. So we looked at it then because we had World Cup. We had World Cup, so we looked at it then, and we wanted to move all the so-called vagrants, that's a strange word, off the street and put them in jail because they're vagrants. They didn't logic. It is not logic. So, Madam Chair, I'm a bit rusty. And so I guess before you get rusty, I'm a bit rusty. But I am happy, Madam Chair, that I have a brother from St. Peter who said some things today. And my brother from Christchurch, who today said to me, you have to speak. And he was not even begging me to speak. He was saying to me, I have to speak on this particular issue because I don't know what worth would I have if I didn't speak on poverty and poor housing conditions and the marriage between urban and rural development. I wish the minister all the best in terms of executing the policies in relation to the restructuring of the urban and rural development.
Honourable member for Christchurch, please.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I raise to support the Rural and Urban Development Commission Bill 2025. Madam Deputy Speaker, I grew up hearing about the UDC and RDC, and like many others, I knew they were both designed to help assist persons out of poverty, help put persons in housing, help persons to enhance their circumstances and their livelihoods. But why the UDC dealt with one set of people and the RDC dealt with another set of people, and where the boundaries lay and what the cutoff point was a mystery to me, like it was, quite frankly, to the rest of Barbados. The persons who benefited from the assistance provided by the RDC knew that the RDC was for them, but they didn't necessarily know why the UDC was not. So I am glad for the explanation tendered by the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, because that cleared up a lot of confusion and misconception from persons. And I mean, if we're honest, today was, in addition to the contributions served in many instances as a teaching moment for a lot of persons, helping them to understand the framework which formed the collective to assist Barbadians out of poverty. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I came face to face with the workings and the operations of both UDC and the RDC in a major way, because disaster management is under my portfolio. And after we were visited with the destruction occasioned by Hurricane Elsa and the freak storm, destruction pretty much on a scale that had never or not recently been seen in Barbados, requiring perhaps the largest mass-based infrastructural mobilization in our history, that I then began to fully realize what RDC meant, what UDC meant, where the boundaries were, and why, quite frankly, we were wasting time having two separate organizations that, when it came out of crunch time, chipped in to do exactly the same thing. So I want to start from the outset by thanking the officers of the UDC, RDC, and those from the National Housing Corporation as well, because as we weathered Hurricane Elsa and the freak storm, and if you looked outside at any time during either of the two of those, and you saw the trees bending, and you heard your own roof rattling, and you saw things flying past, you knew that while you might have been safe in your house, there were persons who were not safe in theirs. Circumstances did not allow them to be as safe in their house as you were in yours. As we got the warning, as we went from a watch to a warning, as the time drew nigh, and most persons were doing their preparations. The preparations are the same. The preparations are move all garbage from out of your yard, anything that could be loose and be a missile, clear your gutters, clear your drains, stock up on water, all of the normal things that we get during the hurricane season. And as persons rushed to do that, and those who had shutters put up shutters, and in many of the government buildings, as we were under pressure, National Housing was going out there and putting up plywood shutters on a lot of the schools, the hurricane shelters, certain key government installations, to batten us down and best prepare us to weather the storm. As we were making the preparations to make ourselves comfortable, there were certain people in Barbados, Madam Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, who knew that there was no preparation that they could do to save their house. There was no preparation. I have urged people over and over to be honest with themselves about the state of their living conditions, because it might make a difference to their life. I have told this story before, and I'll tell it again. There were two families in my constituency, two, that we were concerned about in particular. didn't know how the houses were standing day by day. And we knew that there was no chance of these houses surviving a storm. No chance. And so said, so done. Before Hurricane Elsa came, we went specifically to those two families and said, y'all need to go into shelters. Your house cannot withstand a storm. And I don't know what it is about Barbadians, mom, and the attachment to house. I would never stay in a house, right, that I think I'm going to lose, because my life, I could build back a house. I could be homeless. I'll find somebody to build a house for me. I can't get back my life. But I came face to face without my own parents. My parents were in their house and they said, look, come by me. And my senior parents, I don't want to give their ages, one over 90, one just under 90. Right? Ripe old age. My senior parents refused to move. They were not coming by me, they were sticking it out in their house. And that is the approach of a lot of Barbadians. We will stick it out in our house. When I ask the people, why would you not move? That's what the shelters are there for. We will send somebody for you, take you to the shelter, and right after the event, we can bring you back. But Bajans collect, every Bajan wants to own a piece of rock. And owning a piece of the rock does not just mean owning land. Owning a piece of rock is the whole dream that goes with owning the piece of rock, which includes owning the piece of rock and the house on the piece of the rock. And the memories you collect, and the pictures that you hang up, and the plaque that you got for perfect attendance at primary school, and the little crystal thing that you got for going to church every Sunday for the early service, and selling the most tickets for the church fair. All of your life is encapsulated and displayed in your house, and you don't want to leave it. Madam Deputy Speaker, after begging and they refused to move, we went. As the person responsible for disaster management, I was taken to the DEM headquarters, where we manage the disasters from there. When the country is on lockdown, that's where we are to control what happens, the NUSC. 2 hours into the weather situation, I got a call from one of the persons. And that call was, I heard a lot of screaming in the background, I heard a lot of shouting, and the person was saying, Ms. Abrams, please, 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 send somebody for us now. And I told him, I cannot send anybody for you now. Because we were shut down, storm conditions were going on. And you're hearing the crying, and then the line got cut off. As soon, Madam Deputy Speaker, as soon as the all clear was given, my first visit was not to go and check my parents, not go and check by anybody else. My first trip was to find myself down to those two persons. And both houses had collapsed like a pack of cards. It is God's grace putting his finger on a family that nobody in did. Both houses collapsed like a pack of cards. Right? I do not know how nobody died. In accordance with the gesture of ultimate social responsibility on the part of the Barbados government, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the entire party decided that this was the time we showed that we care. And we undertook to repair every house that was damaged once the person was not in a position to repair it themselves. If you had insurance, well, then you deal with insurance. But where there was no insurance, as is the case of the majority of Barbadian houses, unfortunately, then we undertook as a government to repair the houses that could be repaired, and rebuild the houses for those whose houses could be rebuilt. Where did we turn for the assistance? There was a whole of government approach to the rebuilding process. The DEM and the DEOs collected the initial information and verified it. We went through the ministry responsible for social care, right? People empowerment, went through national housing. Pretty much almost every department of government was involved in trying to get people back on their feet and rectify the situation. But when it came down to the actual bricks and mortar, the actual replacement, the actual pinning back on the roofs, Madam Deputy Chair, that fell in the main to the UDC and RDC. And we've had persons who complain it took a long time to get back in your house. But with reports of over 1,700 houses damaged, everything ranging from roofs off to complete destructions. And then you had others, up to now, Madam Deputy, up to now, we still get people calling and asking if they can come under the ELSA program. We realize in that instance that we are not as prepared as we are for a massive rebuilding effort. And it is better to prepare yourself against the devastation than it is to try to rebuild after the event. UDC and RDC use a lot of local contractors, and by local contractors I meant persons within the area. So if you're in the Pine, then chances are it was a contractor or somebody from near and around the Pine that dealt with your house. There was a lot of work to go, and a lot of contractors got work. But we recognize we could not rebuild as it was before. In most of the instances, the houses that were damaged had not just the roofs lost, but you had underlying other issues that made it impractical to repair those houses. UDC and RDC came up with a design, almost like a cookie cutter design for rebuilds. If it was a 2-bedroom, they had a 2-bedroom design. If it was a 3-bedroom, they had a 3-bedroom design. If you go around Barbados, you can now see the evolution of the design of houses in Barbados. We went from the standard houses built in the 70s had a certain look. Houses built in the 80s had a certain look. The chattel houses had a certain look with the hip roofs, right? The old plantation style houses had a certain look with the, I forget what you call that thing where the roof is inside the wall. Parapet roofs, thank you, right? We have another design now. You can drive around Barbados and look and see the houses that were rebuilt under the ELSA program. They're made majority of cement board, which is remarkably strong and resilient. They're built off the ground, so they are not resting on the ground to get damp or termites. The houses have a space with a small, I don't want to say cellar, but they're raised off of the ground. All the houses have hurricane straps, all of them, and they are in the main exceedingly well constructed because they're supposed to be able to withstand the next storm of an ELSA kind or above. Not to make a plug for it, Madam Deputy Chair, because this is not my position to make a plug, but there was a recent fire, I believe it was in St. Peter. There was a recent fire where a number of houses burned, and the one house that was left standing was one of the recently constructed houses out of cement board. So as the other wooden houses around it burned, the cement board appeared to prove its resilience by being the sole standing house in a landscape of charred properties. It shows that we have built to a certain standard. It shows we've improved the housing stock. The practical reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the houses that were most damaged were the houses at the bottom of the housing stock. The houses that were the most vulnerable. The houses that were in need of repair or rebuilding in any event, and the persons were not in a position to do it. So while UDC and RDC and housing to cut the mantle and replace the houses, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael East said, the purpose of those was to provide housing for persons who would otherwise be homeless, persons who cannot afford to build or maintain their own property. So UDC and RDC fulfilled its mandate, albeit in the aftermath of a disaster, and they did it not by a separation of UDC and RDC and the philosophical ideals that informed the formative differentiations between the two organizations. They did it on a blanket of let us now repair and rehouse for the persons who now have no housings following a disaster. So I wish to commend the persons from UDC and RDC who work hard and tirelessly over a couple of years to assist Barbadians in getting back on their feet. The other thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that where the rebuilds were taking some time, where persons admitted that, you know, my house sustained some damage, it is uncomfortable to live here, but it's still livable. A lot of Barbadians opted to help themselves. So the facility of the UDC and RDC then was expanded not just to rebuild, but if you got a contractor or a carpenter or somebody who could rebuild your house or repair your house, to give a quote, and the quote is verified, as in this is what is needed to deal with this house, and the person could undertake to stand the expense of the workmanship, and the UDC and RDC stepped up to purchase the lumber and purchase the supplies to get the houses constructed. So we went through a multifaceted approach to this. For those who could not afford it, UDC and RDC stepped up and did it all. For those who could afford it, and I want to commend some Barbadians. I want to commend Barbadians because you did not have the whole scale sector of persons trying to take advantage of the situation. People realized it was a small pot of money, and that pot of money had to service all, and that some people lost everything. And the number of persons, it was a couple hundred persons who actually opted, I think probably about 300, Senior Minister, there were probably about 300 persons who opted just to take the materials and deal with the rebuilds themselves. And I want to commend them for being responsible in understanding that this was not a free-for-all. Now, the one thing I have to say is that we need to look as a country at how we can make insurance affordable for all. Because we can't have a situation again. The government is not in a position again to do what it did during Elsa and the Freeze Storm. That's the reality, right? We have a hurricane strap program that is going on right now. I think we are close to having strapped close to over 1,000 houses. And the hurricane strap program is still going. It is available. Anybody who wants to have hurricane straps applied to their property can contact the DEM and make arrangements to have the straps applied. They will send somebody to you. You can get the straps yourself and apply them. A lot of people don't want to do that. The DEM will send persons to your house to apply the straps. What we have had, though, in many instances, person not understanding what the criteria are. So it's convenient here to give that criteria. For the straps to be put on your house, the rafters need to be exposed, because a lot of people think you strap down the galvanized. You don't strap down the galvanized. You strap the rafters down. So if the galvanized was to go in a weather event, you still have the frame on which you can put back galvanized or put back tarpaulin or effect some other covering to your property. But what we've discovered as well is that a lot of the houses where persons wanted to have hurricane straps applied, that the houses, quite frankly, it made no sense to put on the straps. The walls were as thin as, the uprights were as thin as paper. Some of them were unfit for the straps, but those then were brought to the attention of government, and those names were then passed back on to the same UDC and RDC who assisted many of those people in actually effecting repairs to the structure of the house that you could then put on the straps and make your house resilient. So out of bad came good. Out of the worst came salvation of some sort. We acknowledge the weakness of our housing stock. We had no choice but to acknowledge it, because the most vulnerable was flattened. The call has gone out for insurance. It is accepted that insurance is expensive, but everybody who can insure their property should actually insure their property. Why? It has been said, and I will say it again, I do not think that the government will ever be in a position to do again what it did on the last occasion. People have to work to make their houses more resilient. All the new builds, the template is there. I am sure a person wanting to build their own house now can actually go to the National Housing Corporation and ask them for advice on how to make the house resilient. All of the auxiliary builds have been rebuilt to make them as close to hurricane resistant as you can get. It's in the design, it is in the straps, it's on all the little add-ons to make the house as resilient as you can get. So there's no excuse now to build at less than. Any person who is building a house in Barbados and who has the resources to do so should build their house to withstand at least a category 1, a category 2. If you are not financially in a position to build your house that way, that's when you reach out to the Rural and Urban Development Commission after the passage of this legislation to say, I would like to but I can't, I need the assistance. That is what it is there for, whatever name it is called. It is now the amalgam of the two, because as I said at the beginning, there was no need to have it as two. We all understand what it does. This is to provide housing solutions for those who can't afford it. This is to provide the assistance for those who require the assistance to get the housing solutions that they can't afford. This is meant to enfranchise those who are otherwise disenfranchised and to provide the housing that is required so that even the most vulnerable in Barbados have a basic standard of house that they can live in. Now, I do believe the time has come for us to look and find a solution to the insurance issue. That's the reality. There are some people who will never be able to afford insurance for their house. But at the end of the day, if the house goes, they can't afford to put it back up, and the government can't afford to put it back up either. Not on the scale that we did before. So at some point in time, we need to figure out, and I know discussions have been going on, we need to figure out what is the solution, because there must be a solution. A solution must be found. The person that the house was rebuilt for, falling elsewhere, must be able to get some level of insurance to cover that. Otherwise, we would have wasted our time. Something must be put in place to spread that risk across a wider base than Barbados alone. The reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are changing. Times are changing. The climate is changing. When I was a child growing up, if you managed to get a hurricane, category 5 in a year, right? That was an awful thing. Years would pass and you would not get a category 5 storm. Right now we're getting category 5s every year. And not just that, but the systems are coming earlier and leaving later. The climate has changed. We cannot bury our heads in the sand. We dodged a bullet the other day with Beryl. Beryl passed 100 miles, the effects were 100 miles off the south of Barbados, and yet it didn't damage houses, but it tore up the coast. It damaged St. Peter in a most major way, that St. Peter is still recovering from the damage occasioned by Beryl. 6 men's. So it's not just the wind, we're looking at all of the multi-hazards associated with the climate change and the climate crisis. So we now know it is getting worse. We can't, with the knowledge of knowing it is getting worse, continue to do things as we did for decades. We now need to build and adapt to expect the worst. We have been warned. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will say one other thing to wrap up. A number of people have been complaining that they did not get they were not able to get their houses rebuilt or even repaired. The reality is government can only do what government can do. And government must also respect the rights of the landowner in this situation. So in some instances where persons were on property without the consent of the landowner, when the house was destroyed, if the landowner objected to the house going back there, then National Housing Corporation could not act illegally to construct a house on property that did not belong to the affected person, contrary to the rights of the landowner. Some people didn't want to hear that. They say it was family land, and there were some issues. We will admit there were some issues, but I wish to just explain this. Where persons had title to the property or the permission of the title holder, they were accommodated either by the RDC, the UDC, or the National Housing Corporation. Where, even in some instances, where title could not be proved immediately, but there was no opposition to the reconstruction or the repairs of the houses, those were even done. But where the landowner stepped forward in many instances to say, I do not give permission for a house to go back on my land or to go back there, then as much as we feel sorry for and feel the pain of the person who lost the house, there is nothing that the government can do. The government and the agencies of the government cannot be used to participate in or facilitate an illegality. That is the harsh reality. So for those people, we sympathize, we empathize. Reach out to the National Housing Corporation and ask them to assist you in some other way. But in terms of rebuilding where you were, if it was not your property and the landowner says they don't want a house back there, then the government cannot put a house back there, no matter how sorry we feel for you. We cannot put a house back there in breach of the law and in breach of the rights of the owner of the property. The last thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is I want to commend the small contractors that stepped up. In many instances, we discovered a lot of the National Housing Corporation and UDC and RDC now have a larger pool of persons from which to draw to construct houses and housing solutions in Barbados. Before, they were only aware of a certain set, but a lot of people stepped forward. There's a youngster from my constituency, I don't want to call his name, but he constructed a house for another constituent. And when I went into the house and I saw the work that he did and he finishes, and I said to him, man, this is amazing. He said, Mr. Abrams, I have a point to prove. I have now been given a chance to do work for the government. I may not make a lot on this house, but I will now show the level of my workmanship. So if they want a contractor to work with them and to build, they know what I am capable of. If you check through my social media, right, you will see at a post a couple years ago, I'm standing at the house and they named the contractor, right? But I'm not going to name him here. But the work was of an exceedingly high standard. And it's not just him. Across the country, we discovered a lot of people who had real talent. Groups of persons got together to repair and rebuild houses, right? And I am glad because it has now expanded the pool. It has now expanded the pool of skilled persons in Barbados that we can draw on, A, in a case of emergency, and B, in the normal course of business of the UDC, RDC, and the new Rural and Urban Development Commission. The very last point, Madam Deputy Speaker, is I want to take this opportunity now that we are amalgamating the two entities to also thank the Barbadians who stepped up in the aftermath of the disasters to lend assistance to their neighbors. Persons put aside thoughts of money, persons put aside thoughts of gain. Persons came out in full force to help those less fortunate to repair their house, get them back on their feet. Some Barbadians took in their neighbors until they were able to find something else. So a different approach has come out of the disaster. We regained some of our humanity. We regained some of our community spirit. We regained some of our neighborliness. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope that with the new amalgamated Rural and Urban Development Commission, as was indicated by the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, that we don't make a big company and forget the ethos that informed the creation of the smaller company or of the smaller institutions. And that what we just do simply here, is we come out with a more efficient, a more administratively proper, a company more able to deal with economies of scale, that the amalgamated company can provide the same and a better service at a better price to a wider range of persons than before. So having said all of that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to completely support the amalgamation of the two entities and this bill, and I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't propose to engage the chamber for too long. Really, the purpose of my speech is more to set a somewhat historical context and to reflect on my own experiences with, in particular, the Urban Development Commission. The important thing, though, that we have to recognize, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that, and they've said it countless times, the only constant is change. We've had the experience of having an Urban Development Commission since 1997 and a Rural Development Commission since 1996. So we are now on the cusp of 3 decades of having these agencies work for us. We've seen areas in which they've excelled. We've also seen areas in which better could be done. We recognize that given the demands of a modern Barbados, it is important that we provide a better service to those constituents who require these kinds of services. And it would have been foolish, therefore, for us to expect that 2 disparate entities providing more or less the same functions, in fact, I dare to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, providing exactly the same functions, where the only separation between the 2 is a line running from the south of Barbados and coming around to part of I guess, St. Michael, capturing what we call the Greater Urban Corridor and saying any place to the east of that belongs to the RDC, and any place to the west of that belongs to the UDC. That line, Madam Deputy Speaker, is so artificial that any relevance in terms of concept or perspective is lost on a modern Barbados and is largely anachronistic. It makes absolutely no sense, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the left side of the road to be serviced by one commission receiving a particular level of service, while when you look over the street, look over the road, look over the highway, you see another set of state operatives doing exactly the same function, though perhaps to a lesser degree. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you listen to some voices, there are those who would say that the recipients of the benefits of the Rural Development Commission are not as well served as the recipients of the Urban Development Commission. I am not going to highlight any deficiency during the course of this speech, but perhaps it is a justifiable criticism. But the point is, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we have drawn an artificial line across Barbados and said, this set of public servants will deal with you, and another set will deal with me. There is really no logic that would attend the perpetuation of that narrow geographical construct. There's none. In fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, the line which separates the scope of the UDC from the scope of the RDC was really rather arbitrarily drawn. And if you stood in the middle of one of those roads, you could detect no significant difference between the residents who live on the left of the road or the residents who lived on the right. We have tried, Madam Deputy Speaker, to rationalize how government works. How government works. Part of that we've been able to do administratively. Parts of that we've had to do legislatively. For example, we've looked at the markets and we passed legislation to deal with how our market should function. We've done the same thing with fisheries. All across Barbados, Madam Deputy Speaker, where an opportunity has arisen to rationalize the operation of government activity in a way that it would redound to the benefit of the people to be served, we have taken that step and taken it boldly. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do not, and one of the people who spoke earlier, one of the members who spoke earlier, spoke about National Assistance Board houses and welfare houses. When the Rural Development Commission was established, it was established in the context that there was no satisfactory arrangement within the construct of government to address some of the housing issues of individuals who, it could not be contested, needed better housing, but for one reason or another, either would not or could not get a welfare house. I well remember, coming from St. George as I did, seeing welfare houses being put up for elderly individuals. It was a process that was long and drawn out. It was long and drawn out because it was mired in the operation of the public service. And the first thing that had to be done was that we needed to put a nimble organization, or an organization that could demonstrate nimbleness, make decisions quickly, give out contracts, and address those kinds of housing needs in short order. But the fact is, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the individual who would ordinarily benefit from a welfare house was not necessarily the same person who would benefit from a house from the RDC or from the UDC. Certainly in your constituency and in mine, as they're bottom bound, we know individuals who are not necessarily welfare cases, but who are, because of their circumstances, are unable to address their own housing need. And so they live in residences that probably do not deserve to use all the letters of that word, because they really couldn't call them residences. And the RDC, when it was set up, as I said, the RDC came first, then the UDC. It was to be able to provide for a set of people who were not being catered to by the system. And in the almost 30 years that these institutions have been with us, they have, by and large, worked well to satisfy those needs. But both of these agencies also did something that was not present in any other part of government. Because we recognized back in the early 90s that development rang hollow if you only considered the question of, does this person have a roof over their head? A vital part of the work of the UDC and the RDC was that they were there to also stimulate economic activity and allow individuals to be able to pull themselves up from their bootstraps. There are a number of individuals in my own constituency, Madam Deputy Speaker, who operated what I suppose in an earlier generation you would call cook shops. Now we call them restaurants and bars. And I know some of those individuals who went to the RDC and said, listen, I can no longer handle my clientele with this 4-burner gas stove I got, this little small oven. and they were able to obtain loans from the RDC and from the UDC to be able to make investments in their small businesses. And I can say to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, those people repaid the loans and those businesses have thrived. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I like to think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I was there in the beginning because I have the honor of having been the first chairman of the Urban Development Commission. And I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, that when we started the loan program, and I hope nobody laughs because it's not funny. The smallest loan that the UDC gave in those early days was for $52. $52. The records will show that the UDC, under my chairmanship, gave a loan for $52 so that a lady could make an investment and buy sweeties to be able to sell. She paid back every cent. So the economic activity ran the gamut from the very small to individuals who had more impressive businesses. But in every case, Mr. Speaker, those individuals had no place else to go. They couldn't go to a commercial bank. They couldn't go to a credit union. They couldn't go to any other lending institution. Now we have the trust loans. We didn't have it then. And those individuals approached both the RDC and the UDC and were able to get loans, concessionary loans, that were to be used and were in fact used for them to do their small businesses. Individuals bought small vans to be able to do freighting. No big loans, but it was the kind of incentive and opportunity that those individuals needed at that time. And these two agencies made a big difference in the lives of many Barbadians. But what is the context, Madam Deputy Speaker? In 1996, the still new ONAFA administration passed a piece of legislation called the Special Development Areas Act. It came into force in March of 1996. And the Special Development Areas Act was a piece of legislation that was intended to bring significant commercial activity to certain areas of Barbados, and I can list them for you. The Carlisle Bay Redevelopment Area, Spikestone in the parish of St. Peter, St. Lawrence Gap in the parish of Christchurch, the conservation area defined in the Soil Conservation Act. And the purpose of that legislation, Madam Deputy Speaker, was to provide an incentive scheme for individuals who wanted to make investments in certain kinds of activities: hotels and conference centers, residential complexes, commercial or industrial businesses, including office complexes, other facilities directed towards the improvement or expansion of services to the tourism sector, water-based activities, tourism projects, arts and cultural investments, and agricultural-based activities. And if you were doing any of these kinds of activities in any of those areas, you were able to get exemptions from various taxes and duties and so on. We passed that law in early 1996, and it came into force in March of 1996. But recognize, Madam Deputy Speaker, who this target audience would have been. This target audience would have been for those people who had access to large amounts of capital and who were going to be able to do projects of a significant kind for their own benefit. No doubt Barbados would have benefited. These enterprises would have employed Barbadians and so on, yes. So this was an incentive scheme that was justified, the Special Development Areas Act. But it was obvious to the still new ONAFA administration that with all that we wanted to do for big business, if we did not carry along the small people in Barbados, then we would have perpetuated a country which had classes of the haves and the have-nots. We would have put housing and all kinds of fancy projects in the Carolina Bay area, but across the road, you would have had people like you and me living in squalor. So the administration at the time, I was chairman of National Housing Corporation, but National Housing Corporation was not intended to deal with this kind of housing either. So at the time, I think it is fair to say that we recognized that we were making opportunities for people to do major developments, but we could not justify it in a modern society if we did not take the steps to make sure that development at a grassroots level could also take place. And so we had the Rural Development Commission Act, which came into force in March of 1996. I misled the chamber earlier. And then you had the UDC Act, which came into force in 1997. So we were able, through these three pieces of legislation, to target different markets, different sets of Barbadians, different sets of people to do different sets of things. Now, there are some sections in those pieces of legislation, the RDC Act and the UDC Act, which we never acted on them. Those sections dealt with development schemes, and at the time when we were looking at it, we said that the RDC and the UDC would be able to go into an area and say, listen, this area needs to be rejuvenated. And certain things could have been done in law which would have allowed them to move around houses, put in roads, put in new houses, and gentrify areas. And there were some areas that I think were intended for that kind of intervention. Certainly the RDC, the UDC had in mind places like Cat's Castle and some other areas outside of Bridgetown. But we never acted on those things. We never acted on the statutory powers that gave the RDC and the UDC the opportunity to do those things. Under the RDC and the UDC Act, those agencies were able to do their own compulsory acquisitions. But we never did that either. All the acquisitions continued to be done, if any, under the Land Acquisition Act by the state. I'm very happy to see, Madam Deputy Speaker, that even though RDC and UDC, as they then were, never activated those sections of their constating legislation, notwithstanding that those provisions find themselves still in the new act because there may well be a good need for that kind of intervention. The Commission is able to do what are called redevelopment schemes. And that redevelopment scheme would essentially redevelop an area, lay it out afresh, determine the number and nature of houses to be provided by the Commission, how many houses will be constructed per area, per acre. It dealt with the demolition of existing houses and things of that sort. I'm saying that we always had those powers in the original act, but we never used them. But perhaps the time has come, and there might have been good reason why we never used them, because the agencies as they were established then simply never had the capacity to do it. And there's a significant amount of illogic about the RDC being able to do acquisitions and redevelopment schemes in urban Barbados, in rural Barbados, using one set of skills, one set of human power, which you can hardly find these days, to tell the truth, and the UDC trying to do the same thing on the other side. It's almost like if they compete against each other. It is not good for Barbados to develop in that kind of piecemeal way if we have an alternative. And the alternative we present to this chamber, we present to the people of Barbados today. We present a Rural and Urban Development Commission, a single body corporate, a single statutory corporation that will have under its statutory purview the whole of Barbados. Think about that. The whole of Barbados. This administration, in everything that we have done since coming to power in 2018, have focused on developing the whole of Barbados. One of our early mantras used to be, where no one is left behind. And by taking this step, we get rid of that artificial line between rural Barbados and urban Barbados, because there are some parts of rural Barbados that look as urban as parts of urban Barbados, and there are some parts of urban and peri-urban Barbados that look distinctly rural. It is, again, I come back to the point, it is an artificial construct. It made sense then, it does not make sense now. So this new agency, and the Minister for Christchurch West has, the MP for Christchurch West has spoken about the HR matters and how we deal with the staff, because obviously you're going to have, you have a general manager for each corporation, you have a deputy general manager for each corporation, you have accounting staff, you have this, you have the next thing. There's some things that obviously have to be addressed in this new body, but we have engaged completely. We've put all of our cards on the table as far as the workers' union and the NUPW are concerned. We've spoken to them candidly. We've opened our palms, let them see exactly what we're doing. They've had ample opportunity. I think they had about 6 months to review this legislation. About 6 months to review it. We said, this is what we intend to do. We had made the announcement long ago, started working on the act, and I think that what we have today is an opportunity to take fresh guard, and see how we can look afresh, anew, with new and unjaundiced eyes at developing our country, our small country as a whole. I wish this venture every success. As I said, in some ways, I was there in the beginning. We now have a new beginning, but this new beginning is intended to deliver the same kinds of services that we've delivered since the early 1990s. Only this time, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are committed to delivering them better. I'm obliged to you.
Our member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, let me commend and thank every person who contributed to this debate. We certainly had a very robust debate covering many aspects of the amalgamation, of obviously the work that both of the commissions have done over the years to the benefit of the people of Barbados. There are a couple things that I wanted to clear up as the directors and change managers asked me. The first thing is those people who choose to leave, who choose to separate from the commissions, either one, they'll be given a voluntary separation package. It is not, as the member for Christchurch South was trying to suggest, that it's severance. So state-owned enterprises don't get severance, but it's a voluntary separation package, and I wanted to make that lucidly clear as to what they would be offered. Those who decide, for whatever reason, early, close to retirement, decide to change path of their career, whatever it may be, there will be a voluntary separation package and not a severance. The other thing that I wanted to clear up apart from that is it has to go to design of houses. And let me be clear, when people rented land and put their houses on that land, those houses were built and designed to be movable. And that's why we call them chattel, because they're movable houses. But what has happened over time and why designs have changed, and don't get me wrong, not that I don't like the appearance and the ambience and the heritage of a chattel house, which is generally a house on blocks or on stones. But what has happened over time, as people, rather than renting land, which meant that your landlord could come and say at any time, move your house, we have now owned the land. And by owning the land, it meant that the design of the house changed to reflect the fact that you owned the land. So what happened then, and what's happened in construction in Barbados, even for small houses, is because people own the land, they built a better foundation. That's number one. And then by building a better foundation, the house is not designed to be movable. The house is designed to be permanent, to fit on that foundation. So what has happened because of that, that design of the houses has changed. Not that we don't like the appearance of the chattel house with the jalousies and the gable roof with the vent at the top to keep it cool. And essentially, I do like the vent at the top in the middle of the gable. And I think that is something that maybe the modern designs could go back to. And the high gradient for the gable as well, because that is proven to be better and more hurricane resilient. So there's some aspects that, yes, we should reincorporate, but understand that we're designing a different house. A permanent house, which is a house designed to stay on a lot rather than a chattel house. Okay, so those are some of the important things. The member for St. George South adequately spoke about how we were going to develop the urban areas, all the various lots that he identified, and we're going, and whether we like it or not, as we develop the country, we're going to have to understand that we cannot always do single dwellings, that we have to also consider going up, because we have to increase density, so you're going to have four-story buildings in some areas. You're going to have what we're now bringing in, a lot of duplexes. We didn't have that before. What we call quadplex or hexplexes, all of those things, because Barbados must improve. Barbados must develop. Yes, I know that some people like to look and say, we want to keep it quaint and it must look the same way that it did 40 years ago. But I am saying, no. Our people deserve better. Our people deserve an opportunity to get better and to have better. So yes, there are areas that will have the quaint look and so on, but it does not stop us from developing for the rest of the country. And that's what we have to do. So as much as nostalgia has its place, Barbados must develop, because our people must be given the best each and every time. There's nothing too good for a Barbadian. And I will go to my grave saying that, because we strive to make lives of every single Barbadian better. And with those few words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged to and beg to move that this bill be read a second time. Thank you.
Question? The question is, honourable members, that this bill be now read the second time. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I bet move that you do not leave the chair and the House be resolved itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and this House resolves itself in committee on the bill. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, may we take the bill in parts?
Yes, sir.
Part 1, clauses 1 through 3.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 to 3 stand apart.
Wait a second.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 through 3 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 to 20.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 4 to 20 stand apart.
Wait a second.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 4 through 20 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 21 to 34.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 21 and 34 stand apart.
Wait a second.
Question is that Part 3, clauses 21 to 34 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 38 to 37.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 35 to 37 stand apart.
Wait a second.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 35 to 37 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 38 to 42.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 38 to 42 stand apart.
Wait a second.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 38 to 42 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
The first schedule,
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that first schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
second schedule,
Mr. Chair, I beg to move the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
Wait a second.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and I beg to move that you do not report to Her Honor the Deputy Speaker the passage of one bill in committee without amendment.
Wait a second.
The question is that I do not report to Her Honor the Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in committee without amendments. All members in favor, please say aye. Any members against, you say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Honorable members, the chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the rural and urban. I beg to move that this pass be read a third time.
Wait a second.
Question is that this bill be read the third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
I beg to move, Madam Chair, that this bill be now passed and cited as the Rural and Urban Development Commission Bill of 2025.
Wait a second.
Question is that this bill be now passed and cited as and be so cited. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is now passed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that we do take a break and therefore that the proceedings of the chamber be suspended until 8:30.
The question is that this honorable chamber now take a break and resume at 8:20 p.m. 8:30 p.m. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This chamber is now suspended until 8:30 p.m.
You have to minute the file.